Good morning, Briot, or
Hey,
afternoon
Brian.
for you. Actually, it's afternoon for me, just barely. Um, I'm feeling my oats today. I don't know what's going on, but I'm yelling and jumping around, and I don't know what's happening. So if I get excited, don't be scared.
All right. I
Um,
think I can handle it.
we we recently were talking about the Vedas and the history of the Vedas and what the teachings were, what the timeline was, and then ultimately being able to, for our audience, connect it as much as possible to yogic philosophy and Sanskrit and what we're being taught today, so that there is a connection. I've always been curious about it. I know, some very simple overview things that everything comes from the Vedas. So if you could waltz us down memory lane a little bit, would be awesome. How are you today, by the way, first of all?
I'm doing pretty well. The last few days have been nice and cool. There's been like this massive thunderstorm day or two ago, and it was raining again today. So we're not melting for a day. It's
Yay!
been really hot. So it's been quite okay. It's been a very pleasant day. It feels like
Okay.
Durban, actually, a Durban summer.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's still pretty warm, but okay.
it's warm. It's
Um,
Durban.
so how do you feel about today's possible topic? Is that resonating with you? Is
Yes, yeah.
having a look at the Vedas and
Hmm,
connecting them to yogic philosophy today?
right. So the Vedas is something that's been very obscured in modern history because since the Western imperialism have entered into Asia and particularly the Middle East, which was before the British influence known as Bharat Varsha, which included the whole area south of the Himalayas, which was India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, Tibet, that whole larger kind of um, portion of land. Then then Vedic culture was very rich, but then after when the British came to interfere there, they had introduced certain ideas and myths which they created, like the Aryan invasion theory, for example, which I'll talk about a bit later, to try and discredit the Vedas. And then they even date Vedas back to an earlier period than which it actually is dated to. And I'll mention something about that too. So it's definitely it's a very powerful fund of knowledge. It has been very sought after throughout the centuries from various civilizations, and even things like, for example, the Pythagorean formula, mathematical formulas, which the Greek got, they got that from India. They did not come up with these things
Interesting.
themselves. Yes,
Interesting.
yes.
I have some Greek friends that want to talk to you about that, but
Right, and
okay.
you know
Yep,
what
keep
they have
going.
to say. So the Vedas, Veda is a Sanskrit name which means knowledge. And in,
Just,
yeah,
just, just one sec. One second. With Pythagorean, one of the things that he's famous for is that bed, which is a monochord, and he's attributed with creating it, and it's
oh wow,
strings underneath the bed that
yeah,
is to create frequency, the same note, and that is to heal people.
yeah, like
So, do you know from your Veda experience? Do you know anything about that?
I don't know. I've not encountered anything like that before. Although I've not studied the Vedas looking for things like that yet. But
Okay,
but from my
get
personal
back to
experience,
me if
I've
it's
not. But that's really interesting. I've been on this
crossing your
monochord
path.
beds. They're amazing.
Okay, keep
Uh,
going. Sorry to
okay.
interrupt.
So Veda is a Sanskrit word which means knowledge. So anything that constitutes knowledge would be found in the Vedas. It's a complete treatise of work. And today, there's only about, I think it's 2% of the Vedas still remain. And that 2% itself is actually too much to be able to study in a lifetime. So
Okay.
it's very vast. And the Vedas, they existed for countless millennia, practically since the beginning of time and the creation of the universe. And it has been passed down in the oral tradition from a master who has realized that knowledge, or maybe faculties of that knowledge, and then pass it down to the students. And when they have realized it and understood it properly themselves, and they can also pass it on like that. And this way, this knowledge
Hmm.
is maintained. And but then 5,000 years ago, there was a personality who was called Veda Vyasadeva that
Okay.
when he foresaw the current age that was about to start, he understood that people would become very unfortunate, they would become less intelligent, and the memory would become very weak. So therefore, he thought it wise to record it into books. But then he also split it into 4 categories, which are known as the 4 Vedas, to make it easier
Okay.
studyable for us. So they called this the Rig Veda, the Sama Veda, Yajur Veda, and the Tarva Veda. And then different things are contained in there. So this happened 5,000 years ago when it was recorded in written form. And
Okay.
so that would be about 3000 BC. So this predates all known religions today, basically. And it
Okay.
really speaks to different peoples in different walks of life and gives them the knowledge that they want to pursue whatever it is they want to pursue. So in a sense, it is not a spiritual literature in terms of you can approach it for material things, like, for example, economics or agriculture or warfare or politics or moral codes and ethics and logic and things like that. But ultimately, all these things are just meant to fulfill these desires, to give a realization that this is not what I want, and then to try and help you to get to the point where you start inquiring into spiritual knowledge, which there's also a portion that it gives for that. Okay, so now some things which can be found in the Vedas, just to kind of give an idea of how advanced it is. Like in the Rig Veda, which is the oldest one, there's descriptions of electricity and how to build batteries. And then how to use a earthen pot and how to separate them and 2 different substances, and then how to connect these batteries in series. And then if you have 100 of them connected, you can split water into hydrogen and oxygen, and then you can capture the oxygen
Wow.
and use it for aviation, like
Wow.
hot air balloons. They describe it as explicitly as that. Like the words for hydrogen.
Well, there's
Yeah.
they found some of these old pots that were actually creating electricity in Iraq.
Oh, amazing.
So yeah, they exist.
Yeah, they
So they
exist.
found old ones. They're not. I
Yeah.
don't know how old they are exactly. I'm not really good with dates most of the time, but this is antiquated, and yeah, they've had electricity for a fairly long time.
Yeah,
So
they've
those
known
exist.
about it, and there's calculations of the distance between the sun and the Earth and the moon and the Earth, and they coincide quite closely with modern calculations as well.
Okay, in the Vedas. Yeah, they also talk about the pyramids, the circumference, the sides of the pyramid. There's mathematics. I don't remember exactly what you add up, but one is exactly the size of the Earth, and the other one is the distance from the Earth to the sun,
Oh,
and it's
amazing!
exact.
Just see.
So that exists as well. The thing I've never heard before was when you talked about because we're only toying with that technology now. I'm sure it probably exists that we just don't know about it. Is the splitting of water to get out the oxygen and the hydrogen, because
Yeah.
the hydrogen is the fuel. I mean, you can use that. If you can split oxygen and hydrogen, what did you say the oxygen was used for?
Well, they didn't mention about that, but they just said that you can split it in hydrogen, oxygen. The
Yes.
actual
So what,
Sanskrit that they
what
use,
in?
they say Udanavayu and Upa and Pranavayu, which if you know a little bit about yoga, the Udanavayu is the air that moves up. So
Yes.
moving air, helium, and Pranavayu means life sustaining. Prana means life, or life
Yes,
force.
prana.
So, which is oxygen, the life sustaining air, which is the one that you need to breathe. So these are the words that they used for hydrogen,
Well,
oxygen.
that's fuel. If you're
Yeah,
splitting
yeah,
hydrogen, if you're splitting water, you're creating fuel. So
yeah.
that's fascinating.
So they had
Okay,
that.
keep going.
They had it was 3 or is it 500 plus complex surgical techniques which are described in there, like cataract operations, cesareans, amputations, things like that,
Wow.
with also a list of medical tools used to perform these operations. Descriptions of these are in there.
Was there Was
Yeah,
it like saw or laser? What were these tools looking like? Especially cataracts. Jeez.
yeah, they would be like what do you call it, tongs and pincers and scalpels
Okay.
and knives. And
Okay.
then you'd have something like a saw or something, but they also had anesthetics. They also had these kinds of things. It wasn't like I would say, the pre-modern era where you basically had to drink a bottle of whiskey and then bite
That's
down
right.
onto something,
We
and then
got some sewing to do, boy.
you had 5 men holding you down, and then a physician just comes with like an old saw and he just starts hacking at you. Very like uncivilized.
Sounds great.
Yeah, it was not like that. They had anesthetics. They could actually put you, under induced comas and things like that. So these are certain things which existed then, which only now in the last 150 years people have started discovering again. So that knowledge has existed for thousands and thousands of years. It has been there, and so the Vedas is a very vast fund of knowledge, and it has, as I said, it's been sought after by many people. For example, it's well known that um, like the Russians and the Germans in the early 1900s, they were very interested in finding parts of this Vedas. And that there's this one book called Hitler's High Priestess or something like that, which is that Hitler had one girl or a girlfriend or a connection with a woman who had a connection to India. And he was trying to access some of these informations contained in the Vedas, particularly what's called the Dhanur Veda, which is the art of warfare, which is how to use and
Okay.
manipulate weather to your advantage. For example, they can do that in warfare. When to do what, certain formations and strategies, which are very effective. And
Wow.
yeah, so yeah, and even the Russians. So after the Indians India opened up a bit, there was a lot of that stuff which was taken away from India and was lost to these invading countries that were there. And then
Okay.
yeah, so if they want like the
Hopefully they still
Greeks
have
who
them.
were destroyed completely, Athens was completely annihilated, the Library of Alexandria. So I think
Intelligent, yeah.
the type of knowledge you would have
By
found
the
in there,
Christians. By the
right,
Christians.
by the Christians.
By the Christians.
But I wouldn't be
Quite.
surprised to learn that the knowledge in that library would be very similar to Vedic scrolls. That's Vedic.
Okay. Fascinating. Just a quick question about, I think it's Vendanta. There's a teaching and there's a school.
Vedanta.
Yeah. So what is the relationship from the Vedas? Because they're definitely related.
Yes.
So where is it in time and what is that?
Okay. So Vedanta was also a book compiled by Veda Vyasadeva, and it was a commentary on the Vedas. And Vedanta comes from the word Veda, Anta. And the Sanskrit word Anta means the end. So Vedanta means the end of the Vedas or the end of knowledge. Means what is the conclusion of all knowledge? Like what is the conclusion? What's the point of knowledge? And then and what it's all about is explaining the nature of the soul and its relationship with the material nature and the relationship with the spiritual reality and where we are now and how we can ascend to that point. But the Vedanta has also been written in a little bit of an obscured way, in which generally monists, they call themselves Vedantists, and they oftentimes, the monists, people who subscribe to monism, that everything is one, there's only one undifferentiated spiritual energy, there's no such thing as variety or individuality or personality.
Okay,
Ultimate reality is just white light, that's it. And that we like that, and in other words, I am God. That's the conclusion of monism. So they like to use the Vedanta to support their philosophical beliefs, I guess you could say, or their path. But actually, Vedanta is actually a devotional literature. It's actually a devotional literature, and but it's written. Sometimes sages write things purposely in a particular way.
So devotional in the sense of being in seva.
Yes, yeah, that
service.
Yeah, which is more in alignment of like our kind of discussions lately. But people will argue with that, and that's fine. But that argument has happened since the beginning of time, also between dualists and monists, where dualists say no, but there's two. But even in
Okay.
the Bhakti
I'm not a
tradition,
dualist, so
yeah, in the Bhakti tradition, they actually synthesize both. They actually say that there's both one monism and dualism. It depends from which perspectives you're looking, but both exist simultaneously in an inconceivable manner.
yes.
So it means that we're all
Okay.
one by quality because we all part of the same spiritual source, like the sun rays and the sun. So there's no difference between them.
Yeah.
They have the same quality. So there's oneness. But there's also
Yes.
difference because the sun rays are not equal to the sun because the sun rays are small and dependent on the sun, whereas the sun is independent. And the sun ray is just a
Yes.
tiny fragment of the sun. In that way, there's difference. So these two realities, they
Yeah.
coexist. So therefore,
And there's the like when I talk about the Course in Miracles, and one of the things I quote from there is the only difference between you and God is God created you, but you didn't create God.
yeah,
And the
I
sun
love
and
that
the
point.
sun ray is a very good analogy for that.
Yeah,
So I'll be stealing that, by the way. Thank you.
right. You can go for it. It's called Achintya Veda Veda Tattva. It means inconceivable, simultaneous, oneness, and difference. So to kind of try and
Good.
synthesize both of these ideas at the same time, it will give you a headache. I think we're too
Yeah.
small to fathom that.
Paradox.
Yeah,
You need to embrace paradox at some point.
exactly. Yeah, it's inconceivable. And I think that's also a quality of God is that he's inconceivable. And if he was conceivable,
Mm.
then he would not be God. And what kind of a God is that?
Yes.
so
Yes.
so interesting. So
What kind
the
of God is that?
so Vedanta means the end of knowledge, and that's also been compiled by Veda Vyasadeva after he compiled it. It's his commentary on the Vedas. That's what Vedanta
Do
is.
you have a timeline when Vedanta was prevalent, created, and
Well, I would say the dates now. I know because it was compiled just after the Vedas, so that would be about 5,000 years ago. Um,
wow?
and I would say it was. I think it might have really picked up prevalence at the advent of Sankaracharya. He's an Indian saint who appeared. I don't know the time actually. It could have been like maybe 500 or 1,000 after Christ. It was after Buddha's advent, and
Oh, really? Okay.
yes, and he basically by the strength of his philosophical presentation of Aham Brahmasmi, that I am spirit. Um, and he challenged the Buddhist notion that there's nothing, that everything is just void, then that's when the Buddhists, they fled to the Far East. And then this teachings of monism, which was being propagated by Sankaracharya, which, by the way, just for interest's sake, is an incarnation of Lord Shiva, just putting that out there, that he used the Vedanta a lot. He used the Vedanta a lot. Yeah. So
Okay.
So all these Sankarachaits and people, it's called Advaitavad. It means the path of oneness or monism. They call themselves Vedantists because they're students of the Vedas and Vedanta. So they look into it.
Usually, a group of people do not create a new name unless they're different than something historically. What were they separating themselves from? Like, what's the difference? Like, oneness is, across the board as far as I'm concerned, and that
Yeah.
there's one energy. What were they eliminating? What were they saying? We're not that, we're this.
Well,
Monism.
I think their distinction is that this notion, which is actually a quite a common notion. Like most people on this earth actually think through this paradigm, but it's very subtle. It's the notion that all form and variety is simply due to illusion. That because of illusion, there appears to be this manifestation of variety and form and separatedness between us and our personalities, but actually they don't exist.
Yes.
That the real reality is just one undifferentiated spiritual substance. There's no form, there's no qualities, there's no personality. It just is this spiritual energy. So this is
Yeah. So what about the illusion? What about what do they say about the illusion part?
so they
And
say because of illusion, then sometimes a spark can enter into there and then start experiencing these mirages of what we're experiencing now, that this world is actually not
Right,
factual.
but they're not. It's like Samkhya yoga, or it doesn't seem different than Buddhism or Hinduism, yogic philosophy,
Yeah.
the Course in Miracles for that matter. It doesn't seem any different. They're
Well,
all pretty much saying that this is an illusion and all there is oneness.
yeah. So Buddhism is different, and I'm talking about the original Buddhist tenets, not like the different factions which exist today. As
Okay.
propounded by Buddha and his immediate followers, is that everything is illusion, and actually there's no spiritual reality. Even you don't exist.
Ah,
Yeah, whereas those
okay.
studies of Vedanta or the Advaitavadis is that they maintain that you do exist, but only you
Something is
exist.
real.
It's that you are the only thing that
Something is
exists. Yeah, exactly.
something is real
Buddhism
about
is
me.
like nothing is real,
Something
and and
real.
and and, and the monists, they say you're the only thing that's real. Everything else is not real.
Who says that?
That's the monists, these Advaitavadis. That's what monism is that you're the
Okay,
only thing that's real.
so I'm real and everything else is illusionary, including you.
Well, everything else is me. Everything is me. And these different
Yeah.
forms is
Okay, and
illusion.
that's the
Yeah,
same thought process. Yeah.
everything
Yeah,
is
I
me.
get it.
I am you. I am this
Yeah.
table. I'm the computer, and I'm just so.
Yeah.
And this manifests
Different
itself differently.
mathematics.
Like I know some people say, you know, God has expanded himself into many so that he can experience himself subjectively. That's monism. That's actually just monism. It's in different ways presented.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's all over the show. Okay, good. Thanks.
Yeah, so that's the distinction, and then the difference between that then and like I would say devotional uh, path is that um, this world is factual, but the illusion is that we think it is something else than what it is. That we think it's permanent, we think it can satisfy us, but it can't. But it does exist. Like this table I'm sitting here, it exists at this moment. It exists, but soon it will not exist. It will exist in a different form because the energy keeps changing. But that energy and this manifestation at the moment, that is real. But what I'm trying to do with it, that might be an illusion. When I think that this is meant for me to get satisfaction from, that's an illusion. But the purpose of
Okay.
this table is actually to be used for some higher spiritual purpose. It's like so that's where the difference is with the bhakti. It's like, okay, it's illusion, but Maya does not just, it means not this. It's not what it appears to be. That's what so it is, but it's not what you think it is.
I see it as a construct. I
Yeah,
see
so
everything as a construct.
Yeah, so there's a difference.
Yeah.
And then with the other traditions, which I guess would largely be classified as like Hinduism, which is actually quite a recent word that was made.
Incarnation.
Nowhere in the Sanskrit text is the word Hindu or Hinduism there. It's actually came with British colonialism and kind of some colloquial words. Yeah, it was the Muslims who lived towards the north, close to the Sarasvati River. No, the Sindhu River. Sorry. Then they referred to the people who lived on the opposite side of the river as the Sindhus, the people who live there. And these are different groups of people worshipping different things because they're trying to attain different stuff. But they're followers of Vedic culture. And then from this Sindhu, the pronunciation became Khintu. And then Hindu kind of came after a while, and they were collectively known as Hindus. But within
Is
that,
that, yeah, I heard that story before.
Yeah.
Is that during British time?
I don't exactly know the timeline, but I know
Somewhere
that
in the 1800s or way back?
I'm afraid I don't have that information exactly when, but I know with the British it really solidified and actually became more a thing.
Yeah.
And by the way,
Wow.
Hindus and Muslims lived completely peaceful and happy with each other until the British arrived. It was obviously they're the ones who did it. But okay, so backtrack a
That
bit.
was 19
Okay, so then part of
when
those Hindus, you have then different paths where these people, they're not even pursuing anything spiritual. They're just simply trying to perform some kinds of sacrifices or some kind of yoga because they desire to attain some kind of material destination that they want to enjoy in the next life. So that's a whole class of materialistic people. But what we've spoken up until now are more the spiritually orientated people
Yes.
which take advantage of the Vedas. Whereas the Buddhists are actually not
Right.
Veda followers. They reject the Vedas outright.
Who did?
The Buddhas. Buddha actually, that's
The
one of
Buddha.
the things that he kicked it out because it was being misused. to harm animals. And in the name of
Okay.
sacrifice, they were killing lots of animals. So the Buddha said, okay, I don't want anything to do with this Veda. If this is what it's saying, let's just get back to a human platform of compassion and love and acceptance. And so that's what he did.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So if we can connect, there's a lot of information. So if we can connect at the end of the day, we want to connect the Vedas with what's still present in yogic philosophy.
Okay. So the say I'm trying to like condense it, so it comes out a little bit more concise and shorter.
Yeah, fine, take your time.
Yeah. So the Vedas, when after the Vyasadeva compiled the Vedas, and because his desire was to try and encourage people in a spiritual direction, but after that he was feeling very, very unsatisfied because he thought, but I did everything, I wrote everything without pretense, without any kind of ulterior motive, and my consciousness was pure and I followed all procedures properly, but still I'm feeling unsatisfied. And he was wondering why he's feeling unsatisfied. And he felt that was because he did not describe this aspect of love to creation and the creator directly. He only kind of hinted at it. And that actually the essence of all spiritual paths is love. It's to attain pure love that is already in yourself. It's to reawaken that love. It's not that you have to make it. It's already there. It's awakening the dormant love of God that sits within your heart, which exists within the heart of every living entity. And that this is the actual Vedanta, is to reawakening this love. And then at this stage, then one might, on different paths, there's always rules, regulations you have to follow. But when this love is reawakened, those rules, regulations, they fall away because love takes over and you're just acting on this platform of love and you don't need those guidances anymore because you've already attained what those things were wanting to give you. So then, but until one is on that level, you have to follow rules, regulations. Otherwise, in the name of love, you can actually just be very sentimental or even destructive. Like some people I've seen, certain so-called new age leaders who treat people like utter trash in the pretense of being very spiritual and detached. And I'm just helping this person, with their ego and stuff. But actually the guy's being an asshole and he's using spirituality as an excuse to do that. So
yeah, the Course of Miracles talks about that, that there are no half miracles. There's nobody closer to God. It's completely ego if somebody thinks that they're closer to God than everything else. And then being able to put themselves in a place where, like the priest did, you have to go through me to get to God. And God loves me more than he loves you. So obviously, I'm special. Yeah. So they call it the special relationship.
That's so, right. I like that. So the final thing, what Vyasadeva compiled then, even after the Vedanta, was he compiled the Purana known as the Srimad Bhagavatam, which Puranas, they are ancient histories, and some of the events in them, they date back hundreds and thousands of millions of years on this planet, and even on events on other planets. Like my description of Puranas or the Bhagavatam is as such. It says it's a non-geocentric historical recollection of intergalactic affairs. So what he done was he had compiled certain events that had happened in the history of the universe into the Bhagavatam, and only such events which draw the consciousness to pure love of God in some way or other. And he compiled this literature, and the Bhagavatam is known as the natural commentary of the Vedas, because all these events and the realizations and lessons that one learns from looking at these histories, they all help to reawaken that love which is dormant in one's heart. And it's a very beautiful literature. It's a very mystical literature. It's a very big literature. It will take up your whole bookshelf. If you've got a standard size bookshelf, you need at least two shelves to fill with the books. It's a phenomenal.
Which one is it?
It's called the Srimad Bhagavatam, or it's also known as the Bhagavad Purana. There are many
Yeah.
different Puranas, and different Puranas, they're drawing the consciousness to different things. But the Bhagavad Purana's distinction is that it starts by saying that we reject any and all kind of religious or spiritual path that have any material motivations. And that we condemn any spiritual path which just simply waves the flag of spirituality. So, so outright they say, if this is your intention, then this is not really for you. But then they also say, but anybody who reads it will become purified. So in that way, it is actually meant for everybody. Even liberated souls, it's meant for them too. So even if you're on the perfect platform, then still you can absorb your consciousness and relish the subject matter in this book. So it's yeah, it's quite an amazing book. It is available. You can Google Srimad Bhagavatam and you can find it online. It's a very nice book. So I think I can end with that. That was Vyasadev's last contribution, and I would say it's not something that he made there. This Bhagavatam existed before, but he just recollected it and compiled it into the form that is digestible for us. It is like that. Yeah.
Okay. So
Right.
was that an ending point? Because I have a question if it is.
Yeah, I think you can. Yeah, that was an ending point.
Okay. So so when you're talking about a liberated soul and reawakening the dormant love, we have the love in all of us. We're not creating it. It's just it's dormant. And when we talk about compassion, and we're talking about love for self and love for all that it is. So can you? I just want to emphasize a practical understanding of the love for God and the connection for God. And I have one for creation that's true for me, and I'm pretty sure you do as well. Could you describe what a liberated soul is and how you reawakened your dormant love, and then what that looks like? What's your relationship with creation? What does it feel like? Really, really brass tacks.
Well, I don't know exactly what it feels like since I'm not a liberated soul, but I can give a guess about the qualities of what I've seen myself and. Yeah.
You've been liberated from something.
Yeah. Okay, so I would say a liberated soul is somebody who has transcended the bodily conception of life completely. They've realized their spiritual identity and as being a servant of God and eternal, and that they're free from birth and death, and that they're not
So
affected by
are
material
you
energy.
eternal?
I'm eternal.
Are you eternal?
Yeah.
Yes. So am I. Do you have a love for creation, a deep love for creation? That's the number one emotion.
Yeah, I have a love. I don't think that love is pure, but I certainly have a love. Yeah.
Do you have have you ever had even a momentary pure love for creation?
Yes, I have.
Good.
Yeah.
See, this is, me too. Okay. Gonna narrow this stuff down. You're a lot of fun, I have to say. And then a practical, how did you get there? What is it that you realized that you were able to connect with your dormant love for creation and self and everything else? When did you realize that? What was the aha that you realized that it was real and that you could open up to that and that you could feel your eternal connection to everything?
Just realizing by some amazing mercy that I'm not this mortal body and that this universe is not meant for me to enjoy. That's not the function of this universe.
Okay, and what is?
And that the function of this universe is to be engaged for the pleasure of God. And then actually doing it, and actually doing it for that purpose, even if it's for a moment, then that's where the realization came in, because through engaging it
Right.
in that way, that the relationship was strongly established and I could feel that presence. And from there was the love
Yes.
was there.
Right. For you to be devotional to creation as a servant, you already had to have an emotional, energetic, spiritual connection to creation. Is that true?
Yeah, you have to apply yourself. You have to endeavor for it.
Yes, that's also true. Okay, so that was fun.
And
There
also,
was
I'd
just
also
one
say
last question.
it's also not just a mental adjustment. A mental adjustment or some kind of philosophical understanding is not what's going to give you that. You have to
Yes.
spend energy to endeavor that, which means with your thoughts and your emotions, and also with your physical actions in your world. These are two different ways in which you actually express your desire for that. But it's not just something you can sit back and you don't change anything in your life and you just accept some kind of thing in your mind and you think, okay, now I've got it. It doesn't work like that, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also true.
Yeah.
Yeah, there has to be an expression of it.
Mm.
Wow, that's really true. The other one is that there's rumors of for the Vedas that there's some writings about an extraterrestrial origin. Um, so it might be, but if you could give a brief, just for those people that are interested in that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
is there anything you can say about that?
Okay. I'll try to keep it short because we're already at 36 minutes, can you believe? But I think
Yeah,
it's a really juicy conversation, so let's go for it.
yeah,
Is that the Vedas were originally received by Brahma, which is the first living entity that entered into this universe upon its conception or its creation. And that before he actually assembled the ingredients and engineered the universe as it is now, he had purified his consciousness by practice of yoga, and then he received the Vedic knowledge directly from source, from God. Like there was a meeting, and then he was actually congratulated. Well done, you did it. And it even says that he came and he shook his hand. God shook his. There was a handshake. Anyway, he received this Vedas, and then these Vedas were then disseminated to different beings, and they were tasked to take it to different levels in the universe. That this universe is divided into 14 planetary systems, which coincide with a lot of different cultures. And in the Vedic tradition, they use like the lotus, but in the Greek they use Mount Olympus, and in the Kabbalistic traditions, ancient mystical Judaic branches, they use the tree of life, but they're all illustrating the
yes,
same thing. They're actually illustrating the same thing. And so they are, what do you call it? They've got congruence amongst those different cultures, which supposedly had no contact, by the way. That also actually indicates prior contact before these things. Interesting enough.
okay. You're
So
talking about the Kabbalists on the Tree of Life.
yes, correct.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so so then this knowledge was then brought down by different beings, and particularly the lineage that I'm connected to. Like I'm initiated into a line known as the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya, and which means the lineage I'm in started by Brahma. And we know like exactly this. It was then carried on to Narada Muni, who is a quite extraordinary celestial personality. And then he's the one who instructed Vyasadeva. And then Vyasadeva was his disciple. And then Vyasadeva spoke to Shukadev Goswami and to Sutta Goswami. And there's a whole list of people who then came. And then my spiritual master is in that line, and I've been initiated by him. So this is one line in which this knowledge has descended like that. And they're different beings also, not necessarily part of spiritual lineages, but that they've been tasked of preserving the knowledge. And also at certain times when the knowledge is lost, then it has to be reintroduced again into this planet, this humankind. So it's kind of in short.
We're definitely going to have to spend a little bit more time on that.
Yeah, it's a big subject.
This is for the yoga teacher training students and alumni, is that if any of this conversation
My data just ran out.
to embellish the areas that you have curiosities.
My
Thank
data
you
just
very
ran
much
out.
once again, Briat.
Thank you
I
also.
look forward. I look forward to tomorrow's session.
Awesome.
Thank you. I know we went over time a little bit today, so thank you very much.
Thank you
Love
also.
and light to you, my sir.
Haribol.